The book is called American Kings, a biography of the quarterback, and you'll find it on bookshelves today. Seth Wickersham, senior writer for The Mothership, author of New York Times bestseller It's Better to Be Feared, The Patriots Dynasty, and the new book, American Kings, a biography of the quarterback. Great to see you again, Seth. I had a random thought late last night that I grew up in an era where the running back was the most important position on the football team. That, you know, you had to have your Jim Brown or somebody of that ilk. And I didn't know if there was a time when all of a sudden quarterback became the most important position and kind of, you know, took the baton from the running back. Was there a line of demarcation in your memory?
What's up, man? It's good to see you. You brought back some hazy memories when you were talking about the old holiday parties. I went to one back in the day, and that was quite the spectacle. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I think that really it happened in the 80s, and I really think that, look, this was a lot of Bill Walsh's genius, and that's that he, partially through desperation when he was with the Cincinnati Bengals, but he developed an entire offense that was based on the pass first as a substitute for the run, and really, he revolutionized football all the way down to Pop Warner. And as I get into in the book, it's interesting to see Steve Young, when he was sort of taking over for Joe Montana, he had this moment where, he was playing really, really well and winning MVPs, but he wasn't Joe. And Mike Shanahan had come along, and he spent 2 days with every quarterback. And Montana was still with the Niners, but he was injured. And after spending time with Joe Montana, he called Joe back, and he was like, Joe, you look at the West Coast offense different than anybody. Like, I need to understand how you think about this. And Joe was like, yeah, I was hoping you wouldn't notice that. And as it turns out, Joe was this incredible practitioner and radical simplifier. And he didn't run the West Coast offense the way that Bill Walsh drew it up. He basically narrowed it down to one receiver. And then if that guy wasn't there, he looked for the outlet. And if that guy wasn't there, he was throwing it away. Whereas Steve was running it the way that Bill Walsh drew it up. And because of that, he was taking some unnecessary contact. So the year after Joe Montana was traded to the Chiefs, Mike Shanahan called Steve Young back in and was like, all right, we're changing the way the offense runs. We're not doing it by the playbook again.
You and the book deals with high school, college, NFL retirement. In fact, the book ends. You're talking to John Elway, and when I read that, I immediately thought of when Wright Thompson profiled Joe Montana, and it was sad because he was the greatest quarterback. This is before Brady surpassed him, and then you lose your identity that he's not the greatest quarterback. And that Wright Thompson kind of said you could see it with Joe. He lost something there. You're chronicling these guys like Elway's done, and now it's retirement and trying to hold on to things or let things go. And you're talking a lot of these Hall of Fame, Steve Young and Warren Moon and Elway. And was there a common theme about once it's over with, how they felt?
Well, I mean, so quarterback is such a unique job, and it has such unique responsibilities. I mean, there was one day with Steve Young that we went through all the hats you have to wear as an NFL quarterback, from, master motivator to spokesperson for a multi-billion-dollar organization, all of these things. We stopped at 17, and frankly, I think we could have kept going. And so I think that, to survive, what interested me most about Elway was that he was the first quarterback who was number one out of high school, first pick in the draft, first ballot Hall of Famer. And you have to hardwire yourself in a particular way to survive that winnowing and to pull that off and to live up to expectation. And he did it. And so the entire look at Elway was what it did to him. And I think that the sadness, that the wistfulness that you talk about with Montana was with him too. I mean, I think that he dealt with that. And I think it's one of the reasons why he jumped back in and became general manager of the Broncos, is because, look, he needed to reinvent himself. But he also went back to what he knew best. And I think that there are some painful moments, in that process that we get into in the book.
You look at the quarterback now and everything funnels through them. They're celebrities. But you go back to, who was it, Bob Waterfield.
Oh, yeah.
Was he the first celeb? Because he married Jane Russell, famous actress.
Yeah.
Was he the first? This was before DiMaggio and Marilyn Monroe, I think. But was he the first, or that's the first celebrity couple that we had?
Yeah, I mean, they were friends with DiMaggio and Marilyn Monroe, ironically. But so from the moment the forward pass was legalized in college football in 1906, I wanted to look at like how fast it took until it became this thing that our country kind of mythologized and celebrated. And it happened a lot faster than I thought. And Waterfield was kind of the first culmination of that. So for people who don't know, he was a star at UCLA, got drafted by the Cleveland Rams. In 1945, he wins MVP. They win an NFL championship. He's married to Jane Russell, who's the world's biggest, or at least the country's biggest pinup star at the time. And the owner of the Cleveland Rams, Dan Reeves, is basically like, I got to take advantage of this power. I mean, you're talking about the golden age of Hollywood. And for that and a few other reasons, he moves the team to Los Angeles. And, that was a huge moment in the idea of a quarterback. Like Bob Waterfield kind of looked like James Dean before there was such a thing as James Dean. And, their celebrity became a huge thing. I mean, the parties at their house, I get into them at the book, but I mean, the parties at their house that overlooked the valley were legendary, because it was this collision of football and Hollywood. Like Pete Rozelle was an intern for the Rams at that time. And he talked about how like one of the high moments of his career, at least his young career, was just being invited to their house and seeing the spectacle that it was.
Talking to Seth Wickersham, ESPN senior writer, and the new book, American Kings, a biography of the quarterback. The most important quarterback in NFL history is who?
I mean, they're all kind of culturally descendant of Johnny Unitas and Joe Namath. So, you have to kind of think about one of those two guys, I think. But, I'd probably go with Namath more than Unitas, because Namath kind of, he not only had kind of evolved Unitas in the sense that like he was calling his own plays and he looked at the job as kind of a field general, but he was the first one, to offer quarterback as lifestyle. I mean, he told boys, and girls everywhere that like, this is what throwing a football well can get you. And I mean, he scared people to death. He scared people to death with his moxie, with his release, with his attitude. And there was a moment late in the book where I'm with Joe and I ask him, like, look, having been through everything you've been through as this American, luminary, is it worth it? Like, would you rather be a quarterback, or would you rather have done anything else? And his answer was really, really interesting.
What did he say?
Oh, I have to have a little bit of cliffhangers, but like, I think the most interesting thing was that it was something that like, I asked him and it surprised him, but you could tell that it was something that he had actually spent some time thinking about, because, he experienced a lot. I mean, he experienced unbelievable highs, some unbelievable lows, and, a lot of physical pain also, obviously.
Yeah. And he was a celebrity.
Yeah.
I didn't think Joe was a great quarterback. I think he fit the character. He looked it. The hair, the Beatles were big. He had that haircut. He had the fur coat, the white shoes, the greatest release a quarterback has ever unveiled. But he had a bar. The commissioner told him to, he had to get rid of bachelor's 3. I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on with Joe in New York, and then throw all the women in there as well. And
and Johnny Unitas was kind of like bedrock 1950s establishment, and Joe Namath was rebellion. And even though he wasn't a rock star. He kind of looked like one, even more than a quarterback. I mean, he was kind of hunched over, and you know, he like I said, he was the first to offer it as lifestyle, and I think that like his influence in the zeitgeist is so big. And you're right. I mean, look, he didn't have like a great career in a lot of ways, but when you're talking about the pantheon of American men who have like influenced culture, he's part of it. And he's up there with some very, very, very famous Americans.
Yeah, I liken Johnny Unitas. He was right out of Mayberry or Leave It to
Yeah.
Beaver, and Namath was Fonzie on Happy Days. He was he was the cool guy, leather jacket. It's great talking to you again. I wish you well with the book. And have you talked to Bill Belichick recently?
Oh my gosh. No, but I think they're going to figure things out there. And I think that like, look, he's changed a lot our impression of him has changed a lot in the past couple of years. And I think that like in talking to people close to him, I think you can't underestimate how pissed he is at the way that things ended in New England. Not just that he was kind of, that he didn't end on his terms exactly, but just the dynasty docuseries and what that did to his reputation. How Don Van Natta and Jeremy Fowler and I reported that Robert Kraft, didn't do him any favors when he was trying to get back in the league after the Patriots let him go. Oh, I'm sorry. After there was a mutual parting. And I think that like, the news that came out last week about, banning the scouts is not just notable in the sense that, the guy can hold a grudge, but it's also that he's willing to be so public with it. And I think that is so much different than the Bill Belichick that we know. I mean, this is a guy who I think as much as anybody in American public life, the past 20 years has been careful with his words and chosen his words carefully. And we're seeing a little bit of a different Bill now. And, it's fascinating to watch the vapor trail from the dynasty, not the docuseries, but just the dynasty, what the greatness they accomplished continues to really continues to this day.
Yeah, but who should be more upset with their exit, Brady or Belichick with the Patriots? I mean, Tom got embarrassed.
Who should be more? Yeah. Well, Tom, he won. He won the narrative forever. And whether he wanted to or not, and I think that like obviously he wanted to prove that there was a different way to win and see if there was a different way to win. But I think that like the stuff that's happened between Belichick and Kraft, look, Belichick and Brady are in a good place. Like, these guys are never going to be spit in your palm pals, but they're in a good place in terms of their relationship. I think it's going to take a lot of work for the relationship between Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick to, be in a good place if that ever happens.
Good luck with the book. Great to catch up with you again. Thank you, Seth.
Thanks, man. Great to see you.
Seth Wickersham. The book is out today. It's called American Kings, a biography of the quarterback. It's a life cycle. It looks at the high school, college, NFL, and then retirement of some of the great quarterbacks of all time.